Well, if you thought being a Chicago Bears fan was already as bad as it gets, it turns out that football culture can actually take a much darker turn. Don't meet your heroes, ladies and gentlemen. Him is a sports horror movie, and it follows a young athlete after he suffers a potentially career-ending brain injury as he descends into a world of terror when he's invited to train with a legendary quarterback whose charisma quickly curdles into something much more sinister. As a massive fan of both sports and horror movies, very rarely do these two topics ever end up intersecting all that much, so you better believe when something like Him comes down the pipe, it definitely has my full attention. And this project has actually had people excited for a little while now. It was included in the last few years of the Blacklist, which is a site that gives recognition to the best unproduced movie scripts that are submitted, and now we finally get to see what it looks like as a full-length feature film. So when I sat down to watch this movie, I was hoping for a ballsy and messed up dissection of professional sports, fandom as a whole, and the price of success, but Him ends up being a pretty rushed and tame experience that throws all of its potential out the window despite a super entertaining performance from Marlon Wayans. When it comes to the story they decided to go with here, this is an absolutely killer idea for a movie. I mean, there have been a lot of horror films in recent years that have turned the microscope on subjects like the price of success, relevancy, and toxic relationships under the lens of being a famous public figure, but never anchored in and around the world of professional sports. This setting is just so ripe for social commentary and over-the-top situations because there are literally tons of people who blindly worship and idolize professional athletes if they're the best at what they do. I mean, if I met Tom Brady and he told me I could be just like him if I let him punch me as hard as he possibly could in the face, I'd have a real tough decision in front of me, I'm not gonna lie. But unfortunately, the movie doesn't end up doing anything all that interesting with its winning concept and keeps things pretty surface level for the most part. A few interesting layers and half-baked twists are presented to us right at the end of the film, and in a vacuum, the conclusion is actually pretty entertaining, but it all ends up feeling decently unearned. Like there must have been 20 minutes cut out before it that would have set things up for a much more satisfying payoff, but instead they try to cram all the clever thriller stuff in there anyway without doing the legwork, and it just doesn't land. Diving into the performances here, Tyreek Withers plays our main character, who's traversing this insane situation with this quarterback who is his childhood idol. The only other movie I've ever seen him in is the terrible I Know What You Did Last Summer legacy sequel that came out a couple of months ago, but he was luckily the one bright spot of that entire film. Something cool to note is that he actually spent some time at wide receiver for FSU, so he has much more to draw on for this role than your average actor, and he does a good job here. Granted, his performance is pretty safe and is just reacting to the craziness happening around him, but he comes off as likable enough and you want to find out what happens to him. Marlon Wayans plays this decorated veteran quarterback that our main character is obsessed with, who uses some, let's call them interesting methods to achieve his greatness, and to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of his work outside of his involvement in the Scary Movie franchise, Requiem for a Dream, and his smaller role in Air, but he delivers a decently compelling performance here and is just fun to watch as the cracks begin to show themselves the deeper we get into this story. The rest of the cast is nothing to write home about as everything is really centered around these two dudes, and their chemistry ends up being the highlight of the film, with the exception of Julia Fox, who you could convince me didn't even receive a script and was just riffing her way through her scenes. She's somehow used to a pitch-perfect degree here. Let's talk about the actual horror factor involved. You know, is this movie gonna have you watching through your hands and shaking like a leaf, or is it just another run-of-the-mill jump scare marathon with really no tension at all? Let's just rip the band-aid off from the get-go here. This movie is about as scary as a middle school flag football game. There are a couple of tense situations that our main character gets thrown into head first over the course of the film, but nothing that's gonna make you even wince in the slightest. A little bit of blood here, a broken bone there, and a metric shit ton of CTE, but no scares to be found. It's too bad because the visuals are pretty interesting and well constructed. Like our director here, Justin Tipping, could probably make an absolutely killer music video if he wanted to, with all the flair and style he puts on display, but instead he ends up smelling his own farts with this one a little bit, because the vast majority of this film is all style over substance. Overall, guys, Him is a horror movie with a fantastic concept that really fumbles the ball when it comes to its execution. The scary elements are lacking, the clever payoffs aren't set up well, and the overall conclusion feels pretty unearned. Tyreek Withers handles himself well as our lead, and Marlon Wayans dishes out an unhinged and addicting performance as this aging football god, but it's just not enough to salvage this story that had so much potential and ends up being frustrating more than anything else. This movie drops the ball and never picks it back up. Him gets a Sully score of 2 stars. So that's my review of the latest horror movie. What do you think's the best one that we've gotten this year so far? I think I have to go with Weapons from Zach Kreger, but let me know in the comments below what you think. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys at the next one.